All right, guys, we are live here today, and we have a very special guest here. We have Mr. Jeff Taylor. He is a visionary entrepreneur. He's got over 30 years of revolutionizing talent experience in marketplaces. You guys might not recognize his name, but I know many of you will recognize the name, I think, Monster.com. Did you found that? I think you
I
did,
did.
right? Yeah, you found it, right? In 1994. And that created two key patents that he reinvented how the world looks for work. Okay, under his leadership, guys, Monster grew, as we all know, so big. It was huge to 10,000 employees or more across 35 countries and nearly $2 billion in revenue. Okay, now he launched Boom Band this year, which is amazing. It's an AI powered talent marketplace designed to challenge hiring status quo. So, by replacing the traditional resumes with dynamic dossiers and creating a more transparent way for candidates and employers to discover each other, Boom Band now celebrates the whole person, highlighting life experiences and boom moments that shape their character and transferable skills. Now, there's tons of other things I could read about Jeff, but I think the best thing we're going to be able to do is talk to him right now. So, welcome.
How you
Welcome aboard,
doing?
Jeff. So, we want to get started here by saying that, Jeff, you you helped change hiring once, and that was huge, right? Monster took recruiting from newspapers and classified ads and faxing things over. I mean, we remember those days, right? To the internet, right? 30 years later, now we're sitting at this other inflection point here. And I don't know about you, but I'm not quite convinced the systems we've built over the years are working well for either side, right? The candidates or the companies. So why don't you explain what your philosophy is around that, what you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing was, some people don't recognize Monster, which is crazy. We had about 70% market share at one point, and then other players started to come into the market. Indeed came into the market, and by and large with the same elements, except for they gave the jobs away for free, and that's not the case today, but that was. And so that shifted the market a little bit, and then LinkedIn came in with professional networking as kind of the center. And so what we've seen over time is this evolution. And I think the challenge we had initially with Help Wanted in the newspaper was that it was very local, right? So I was from Boston, and the Boston paper is where the jobs were listed. I think what's happened with the internet, one of the most dynamic things is now people can apply from all over the world. And so with the pandemic came legitimate remote jobs, which has opened up the world. Now we're sort of seeing that closing, a lot more in-house jobs, a lot more hybrid jobs. And so now there's starting to be a requirement to sort of be back in the areas where you're working.
Mhm.
I'm curious, in your role, do you live near where you work?
Yeah, I mean, I
You
work,
work for
most of my
yourself.
stuff is remote, right?
All right, right.
Right,
And so
exactly. Mhm.
that's the other thing that's happened is a lot more people have decided that they're going to work for themselves, or they're going to work in smaller teams, and they're going to put people together and do gigs and sort of non-traditional full-time work. And so there've been a lot of changes in the marketplace. I think what's happened though is we made it easier, call it my fault, to apply for a job.
Yeah.
And what used to be a quite selective process because of a bunch of limitations, once you take those limitations away, now what we're seeing, especially with the higher supply, lower demand economy that we're in, meaning there's more job seekers looking than there are jobs for them to take, you're seeing almost untenable volume at the company level. I think this has problems for both sides, as you described. As a job seeker, you're sending your resume off with a cover letter into the black hole. You're sending it off and not hearing anything in return. I have a friend that applied for over 900 jobs over 15 weeks. 300 of those job applications nothing happened at all. 300 of those job applications got a rejection within about 6 hours. It was total of 24 hours, but the many came after 5 minutes or after 30 minutes. And so the average was about 6 hours. And so you got to figure that that's not a human, for the most part, probably evaluating those resumes. The third group said, thank you for sending in your resume. If you're not right for this role, we'll consider you for future roles. And then she never heard anything back. So she got 17 interviews out of that 900. Of those 17, about half of those were either bots or electronic submissions where she was being asked questions, but she wasn't talking to a human. And then she got 2 offers that were for volunteer positions or for part-time roles, and 1 full-time offer. The reason why I share this story in this detail is because most people aren't prepared to apply for more than maybe 5 jobs a day. And then there's a combination of anxiety and sort of a perceived exhaustion that comes in, and you're like, okay, well, maybe that's enough and I'll just wait. And then that waiting game is something that quietly creeps up. And I think it hurts your defenses. It hurts your confidence. And so one of the things that I've suggested is that you should do something. You can do anything you want, right? But when I was in sales early in my career, every time somebody would say no or I didn't get an answer, I would put a dime in a cup. And what I found out is that it took me about 35 dimes in the cup before I would actually get a job that I could actually work on. I was a recruiter. And then the same thing for applicants. It was 27 dimes before I would get an applicant that would talk to me and kind of go to the next level. And so I think for job seekers, having some way where getting to yes is not necessarily a process of no's. It's a bunch of little details that actually add up to your yes. And I think that this sort of confidence building activity is something that gets you away from looking at your Excel spreadsheet and the thing that you're using to track and saying, this is frustrating, it's not working.
Yeah, it's that the candidates I've learned, if they have this learned helplessness, right? Because they're applying, they hear nothing, or they get rejected, they apply more, they just keep going, and it just they start to conclude. What I hear a lot is, oh, something must be wrong with me, or something's wrong with my resume. It's not getting through. And,
Right.
and it seems like that even that mass applying with the 900 resumes getting sent out,
I mean,
contributing
it's
to
crazy.
the problem, right?
Right. I think the thing I observe about this story is, first of all, how tenacious, how driven, how much grit this person had, and what's required in this process. The other thing is, you need to use all your tools. And one of the things that everybody seems to get, that they should use all their tools, but not really understanding what to do. And so I think that the idea of quitting applying is not what I recommend. I hear a lot of people saying now, don't even bother applying for jobs. I would continue to apply for jobs. The other thing I would do, though, is I would start to identify 10 to 15 companies that you're interested in. And that makes sense. But then people are like, well, how do I decide what companies? And so you can do that by even sharing using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you use, by saying, okay, here's my background. Here are my interests in where I want to grow in my career. What kinds of companies that are similar to mine are in my area? And on Boomband, you can put yourself in our arena, and then the jobs that match your background will come around you. And one of the things that I just saw recently in a search is someone was searching in Boston and Lego came up. And it's like, Lego, I didn't even realize that Lego was in Boston. So this idea of discovery is a really important part of the experience that you can get on Boomband. If you just go to boomband.com, right at the top of the page, you'll see how you can go in as a guest into the arena and search, put yourself in the center and actually prompt it for what you're looking for, and then go and see what kinds of companies come up. The next thing you can do is go ahead.
No, yeah. So like, with all of this, because I mean, it's still a lot of noise and whatnot, but what actually gets a qualified candidate like real consideration? Because even through the whole application process, you still have to get through. Like, I never discourage people to like apply. It's just still a lot of work, right?
That's right.
So what gets someone
Yeah.
qualified to get through?
Right. So the first thing we're talking about is just not getting uh, stuck. You have to keep it fluid and keep it working, right? And
Yeah.
then what I'm suggesting now is research companies and then go and research in your network who works at those companies and then see if you can reach out to those people, maybe first with a innocent touch.
Mhm.
Hey, we worked together at once in the past. I just wanted to reconnect.
Mhm.
Um, Being straightforward in some cases is the best way, saying, you now work at a company that I'm interested in being a part of. Would you be willing to just listen to my background for a minute, or would you be willing to have a conversation? Would you be willing to introduce me to somebody at your company? And I think that what you're finding is you're going to have to push. And like I always say, you don't have to do anything, but the idea of pushing means that you're going to put yourself out there. And one of the things I notice on LinkedIn, for example, is most people don't post. They just lurk. And maybe they comment on other people's posts. Maybe they forward other people's posts. But
Mhm.
as you start to look introspectively at your job search, one of the things that LinkedIn really thrives on is empathy. If
Mhm.
you share that you're struggling and that you need help, that's one of the best ways to use LinkedIn.
Mhm.
On Boom Band, and I'm going to just sort of bridge around to my new company, the
Mhm.
idea is that you start sharing more stories
Yeah.
on LinkedIn and on your resume. You're a pile of keywords and performance statements, and it's all sort of built to sort of trick the technology. And we've sort of gotten away from the idea of who you are as a person, as a human being.
What
One of the
keywords
things
do
about,
you
I'm
use?
sorry.
It's what keywords you can use, right? To get through.
That's right. That's right. And what I'm suggesting on Boom Band, you build your dossier,
Mhm.
and your dossier is actually now giving a real palette for you to write stories about things that you're doing in your job, projects that you're working on. It's
Mhm.
also an invitation if you're a marathon runner, or you like to kayak, or you're a stay-at-home parent, or you're a caregiver. You're no longer on a career break like you are on LinkedIn. You're
Mhm.
actually identifying the skills associated with being a mom. First time you and I talked, I actually met two of your sons. And one of the amazing things is parenting is one of the best arenas for
Yeah.
training for things that you can actually use in your job. But yet it's not even in the picture. And so what we do is encourage you to identify, write down those skills associated with those stories with your life work, not just your commercial work, and to
Yeah.
capture those so we can put them in what we call the Power Lab, where all of these skills get captured. The other thing that I want to talk about is the employer side, because I think it's important to understand what's happening. The
Yeah.
first thing is there's so many people applying, so many people have job search alerts, and the more desperate you are, the more action you're trying to create with job alerts. So
Mhm.
a job for a marketing manager comes up and you're in marketing, you get the alert, you immediately easy apply. So what happens is in the inbox of that recruiter, you get every person who is anxious and
Mhm.
probably overstimulated through the job search process, and people that may be the most qualified for the role effectively get lost in the noise.
Yeah.
So if you're one of those people that says, you know what, this job is the perfect job for me, why aren't they seeing me? There's a good chance that there were 200 or 300 or 400 people in front of you, and
Mhm.
so they just never got to your resume. And then the other thing that happens is you say, like, okay, I applied for the job. And then 3 weeks later, the job is posted again. Well, so what the hell? And so what we're seeing here is a recruiter, or maybe the system has a max out. So let's say after 200 resumes that it pauses the posting. And then someone needs to go through either using the technology or using a human to go through that first 200 and then realize that they don't have the right person in that mix. And then they'll actually reactivate the job again. That's why you tend to see the same job. The other thing that happens is jobs are evergreen. So you're looking for sales reps or for, let's say, a mid-level developer role, and you have 56 developers on your team. And so you always have a developer opening. So you apply for a job and then you see a month later the same job is showing up again. It's actually not the same job, but there are multiple sometimes of jobs. We call those evergreen jobs. And you'll see that in high volume in particular, like if you're looking for a Starbucks barista or you're looking for somebody in a fast food restaurant, you'll see those jobs regularly and you say, well, I applied for that job. So one of the things I suggest is apply for the job again, use your cover letter and say, I expressed interest in a role like this one a few weeks ago. I apologize if I'm sending in an additional resume, but no, I'm not apologizing. I'm actually telling you how interested and excited I am about the role.
I mean, that's like salesperson, right? Think about sales. When you did sales, I mean, you keep going until they say no, block you, whatever it is, because if you have value that you need to add to that company and you know it, you're a perfect job fit, why would you just stop at the first no? I mean, think about all the things if you would have stopped at the first no, right?
Right.
Would have given up.
And now there's a lot of people that are because it's gotten so easy to apply, are applying for jobs saying, well, why not? I'll apply, maybe, right? And the reality is that you have people that are in construction that are applying for medical device jobs, and it's possible that there's a fit there, but some of these things become a stretch. So I always talk about, from a recruiter's perspective, I talk about camels and giraffes. A recruiter is looking for a giraffe, and a lot of the applications coming in are camels. Yep. Now, there's nothing wrong with a camel. It's just not what that recruiter is looking for. And even though they look similar, the reality is that it's not the right person. The other thing that's happening from a recruiter's perspective is everyone is using the job posting as a cheat sheet, adjusting, fine-tuning their resume to be a better match for the job posting that's sitting in front of them. And the cover letter is going to tend to use keywords or phrases from the job posting. And so what's happening is that's going into the system. There's an electronic clearance with a lot of the applicant tracking systems that's looking for basic skills in order to move somebody on to the next level. Every system is different, and someone will always come to me and say, that's not how our system works. But most systems were set up with a base. Let's say you have to have a certain set of skills, certain knockout questions. You have to live in this country, or you have to have a work visa. For jobs that are hybrid or in-house, they look for people that live within 100 miles. If you don't live within that 100 miles, they may have a block that says that you're not going to be right for this role because it's going to be too hard on you to live in New York City and try to work in Boston.
So if AI is making everything better, right? I like to call it, it's like the great equalizer now, like the internet was all the years ago. What is becoming the differentiator for candidates?
Well, so I just first want to say, if AI is making everything better, I think that's not the case right now. I think what AI is doing is it's a new tool set. Everybody uses this tool set differently. And so if what you're doing is applying for 500 jobs while you sleep, and there's a sort of a less discerning way of which these applications are going in high volume, I don't think that's better. I think that is contributing to the meltdown of the tools right now. I think the idea that I don't know, just talking to my wife this morning, and she's working on something, and ChatGPT can help you with your writing, right? And so, but it can't reinvent who you are, right? So you want to make sure that you are genuine and also authentic. And many times that means that you can use AI to assist you, but you really need to put your own thumbprint on whatever you're sharing. Now, to the second part of your question, it's like, okay, what I think you said, what are the things that we should be doing? Is
What's
that right?
differentiator? Yep.
And how do we differentiate ourselves? And I think one of the things is to be uh, active in doing things that are interesting, that contribute in your role. You figure if you're somebody that graduates from college and you just took the classes and have the major and even have a minor and you don't have anything else, you're now with, if there were 300 people in your class that graduated with this degree, you now look just like those 300 people and 300 people from 17 other schools. So there's no differentiation. But if you decided that there was no place to do your laundry on campus and you proposed that there's an empty room in the campus center and you got the company to come in and bring washers and dryers in and you organized it and got the volunteers to put it together and then got paid for it, and it became now an institution and the university took it over and it's now one of the services that they provide, and you did that. That's the story that you want to tell. Those are the skills that you want to add to the fact that you have a marketing degree and a minor in math, let's say, which would be a cool combination. And I put those skills to work and I created this small business on campus, ended up with 14 employees. And the campus, as I was graduating, took this on and it's now a service at the university. Repeating myself, but I'm actually setting you up to tell that story. So do nothing and you look like everybody else. Start before you're ready. You know, you're looking for a job in marketing, but start while you're in school. And then, okay, so someone's saying to me right now, I'm not in school anymore. I'm 3 weeks out. I would always say, you know, you decide how famous you want to be. And I use the acronym of FAME, and the F in FAME is the idea of acting like a free agent. You have a job as a marketing manager in your company, but what else can you do? Could you organize the summer outing for the company? Could you be involved in DEI initiatives that are in the organization? Could you actually help the C-suite by being a voice of the employees? And now in each one of those cases, when you're going into your review and someone's like, okay, how's it going? And you're saying, okay, the job is good. I think we're achieving our goals. And that's the same kind of conversation everyone else is having. But you also are a liaison to the C-suite of your company for employee voice. That's going to come up in the conversation. That's the idea of what I'm saying, is like that becomes a story that puts you on the right side of the line. I think the same thing is true with AI. And so in the conversations about AI, for example, if you're using Claude Code, and let me go back to the washing machine example, like if you were able to write the program for the 14 employees to actually schedule all them and to have it be self-serve, so you didn't have to do that. Now, all of a sudden, not only do you have the story of being an entrepreneur on campus, but you also have the AI experience of how to get agents to actually talk with agents to build out that schedule. That's next level. And so in every one of our companies, they're going through some sort of efficiency conversations. You just know they are. And so in that efficiency conversation, they're kind of saying, okay, I think we're going to be able to deploy AI into our organization, and that's going to lighten the load. And one of the things I see almost universally is this idea that AI isn't going to take my job, but it's going to give me more time to do like human things. Well, I think that's true. I also think it's going to take some people's jobs.
Yeah.
And so you just want to make sure you're on the right side of the line in those conversations. And one of the ways to do that is when there are conversations about AI in your organizations, you're one of the people that's actually offering solutions and suggesting tools and actually being part of the creation of what the new company is going to look like when you have this sounds weird, but when you have some combination of humans and digital assets that are doing work together, and I think all of our companies are going to end up in something like this, that that you would know how to contribute. And there's another component. I'm going to switch gears slightly here, which is soft skills are always talked about, but never really applied. And I think with AI, your AI is eating tasks in your organization, but the soft skills of creativity and problem solving and the ability to be a critical thinker and the ability to be open-minded and to have good judgment, these are all soft skills that are critically important, especially as we start to evolve our companies. And so being able to tell stories about how you used your judgment or how you used your creativity is a reinforcement to everything that we've been talking about.
No, I think that's great too, because a lot of people, they forget that, especially as we get older, this wisdom that we've had to use in chaotic situations that AI can't solve for you, right? I mean, I was in situations at some of the organizations I was at where we had people have heart attacks in the middle. There was different situations where there was employee arguments, right, with unions and stuff like that, where you can't just go type that in the AI. You have to use your judgment and you have to learn from the things, and then it creates the wisdom. And a lot of people are struggling these days that I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong at what you've seen, that they're struggling to take and say, oh, slow down enough. Let me find those stories that I've had over the course of my career, and let me create those stories. And then how do I pitch that story to these people in the application process? You know, I've been telling people, post, like you said earlier, post on LinkedIn. You don't see people posting on LinkedIn. Yes, empathy. At the same time, post your stories. Post how you solved a problem, because when people are researching you, what's happening?
Right.
They're going to look at your LinkedIn profile. If they see nothing, they're like, okay, probably going to move on to the next candidate because they don't really have anything, and I don't want to extract something out of people all the time. You know?
And to be clear, every role is different, right? And so some roles, it feels important to be able to contribute on LinkedIn. For others, it might be actually doing PRs on GitHub. And so I think that each group, maybe it's on Slack or on Medium, or maybe it's on Instagram, depending on if you're an influencer or whatever. So I think that the vehicle is less of the solution here in this case. It's a matter of what are you going to do to actually help yourself by positioning yourself in the right audience, in the right medium for your job. I see James throwing up a couple things. Haven't searched for a job on Monster for years. I think that's right. I think there's a lot more choices in the market right now, and I think that there was a time when it was the place, and now it's one of many places. I think if you're looking for a job on Indeed or if you're looking for a job on LinkedIn, I think the same thing applies as to what we're talking about, is that it's become much, much easier to find jobs and apply for jobs. That doesn't mean that you can actually take the easy way out. You're going to have to lean in and really support the idea of why you're the right person for the job. I think the second thing was job seekers are not broken, that the system is. And I think that there are challenges on both sides of the house. I think the systems are under massive strain based on the new changes in technology. And I think you'll see new tech coming out over this next few years that changes the way we do this, from a job announcement, let's say, in the marketplace with 600 people applying and very few are qualified, to a much narrower focus, both for seekers that are looking very specifically for certain kinds of jobs at certain kinds of companies and able to make a case for themselves to get those jobs. And the same thing with companies, much more outbound, much more focused on, I want to do more like quiet hiring, where I'm looking for this type of person, being able to go into the data, find the people that have those skills, and figure out what each of those people's propensity to move is. Would they be willing to actually move over for an opportunity? And so I think you're going to see much more precision than what you have right now, to be less kind of throwing stuff against the wall on both sides of the house. I do think, I talk to job seekers almost every day, and I have a job seeker podcast. I do think job seekers need to rewrite their narrative in a lot of situations, and they're in a spiral. And I was trying to figure out, can you spiral up and down? I guess, but gravity would say you're mostly spiraling down. And so I'm forever kind of suggesting, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you do this differently? And for the most part, get people to tell their stories, to speak up about the things that they're good at, and to be able to have clarity in what they're actually doing in their activity, as opposed to sort of thrashing about, which is the tendency when things start to go wrong. Is you're not quite sure what to do and how to focus. So I think, Jason, these are good observations that actually it's James, that there is there's challenges on both sides of the house.
Oh, absolutely. And going to that too, with the company aspect, what's a change that you think that companies could make immediately that would dramatically improve that candidate experience? Because we hear about ghosting on all the sides and all that type of stuff, but what's something that the company can do to improve that?
Yeah. So one of the things about ghosting is that many companies think that they're not ghosting someone unless they've actually gone through some sort of an interview process. And what they'll say is, I'll communicate to people once they're actually in an interview. That isn't even always the case. But I think one of the changes that should probably happen right away is that there should be anybody that makes the effort to, however you apply to a company, that there should be some sort of a letter that goes out, which would solve about 40% of the black hole problem, is just by hearing that we actually did receive your resume and we're considering it. And if it's not right for this role, we'll consider for future. That doesn't solve much problem.
No.
But what that does do is, one of the things when you are driving your resume into a company, you actually would just like the satisfaction to know that it made it, right? Because if you don't know whether it made it or not, you feel like we should try it again. And if Easy Apply isn't working, and that may be the case, that it creates an incomplete application, which then is discounted or discarded because the application wasn't complete, because the auto apply feature that you used didn't check all the boxes, right? And that happens. And so there are cases where you wouldn't ever know because the process wasn't completed, so you're not even registered in these systems. But I think that's something that would be great and immediate that companies could do.
Oh,
I also think this idea of start to think about applying for, let's say, 5 jobs a day instead of 50, but those 5 jobs, you make a meaningful sort of 3 or 4 or 5 pronged attack to try to get to the heart of that particular application. And what that means is you're not phoning it in. And then from a company side, then if they're receiving that, they're getting these different components. They're seeing your energy. I know this is hard, right? But people listening to this right now saying, I am doing that, and still nothing is happening, right? So another way to look at this, you have higher supply and lower demand. It's interesting. The unemployment rate went down this month with really anemic numbers. And so I don't know really if you can put much stock in this, but every 10th of a point in the United States is about 150,000 workers. So when you go from what I consider sort of full employment at about 3.3%, what you have is every 10th is another 150,000. So you've got a couple extra million people in the marketplace that are looking for jobs, and that tends to be a challenge. But if you break it down to your location, so I'm in Boston, let's say, I'm actually in Rhode Island, but let's say I'm in Rhode Island, and now all of a sudden if you look at the jobs that are posted and you look at the competition, you're not looking at 2 million people looking for that job. You're in a specific job. So now it's 60,000. And now you're in a specific location. Now it's 4 or 3,000. Now it's specifically at a level in the organization. Now you're at, I don't know, call it 350. And then of those 350, how motivated are you compared to those other 350? And so now you've got 40. And so now you're competing seriously with 40 or 50 people for a job. And that's very different than thinking about it as the unemployment rate and there's millions of people out of work. And it's really easy to get caught up in the tornado of all of the negativity that's on LinkedIn. I've been looking for a job for 18 months. I've been looking for a job for 2.5 years. I've given up looking for a job. All that narrative, you read it and you're like, yeah, that's just like what I'm feeling. And the reality is you just have to push by that.
Well, yeah, and I think too, this is something that I've been teaching people for the last handful of years is yes, apply, see what you get out of that, kind of play that round. Then also, when you said like the local companies, look at the companies and the problems that they're having. Sometimes, and you know this too, sometimes they have problems. We're sitting in meetings, we're like, we have this problem, blah, 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 and we don't even have time to get a posting up there. We just have to keep fighting the fires. If you can understand what their problem is, figure out how you can be the solution to that problem and present it, like you were saying earlier, you can get in before they even have to put a posting up there. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, this idea of trying to find a problem that the company has is so interesting. It's really hard to do, right? Because you have to be able to look inside the company that you'd really like to work for. And one of the ways to do that is by talking to people that work at that company, right? And one of the things you find out, I just heard about a company in Boston, Whoop, that actually has a lot of job openings, right? And yeah, and I have a Garmin, what's interesting is if you know a company has a lot of job openings, that's fuel,
Yes,
right? And then you would say, okay, let me look closer at Whoop. And then it's like, okay, so I'm a marketing manager. I'm just using that as a term. And it's like, okay, let me go find out what does their marketing department look like? And you're doing a search on LinkedIn, let's say, and you're looking at marketing at Whoop, and you start identifying people. And you can see, oh, there's a VP and there's a director, and there's looks like 2 managers, and one that does consumer and one that does partnerships, and there's somebody that does outbound leads. And it's like, okay, at the intersection of that, if they're growing, they must need more of this. And so how could I give examples of where I've been in a growth situation and where I created more of this thing?
Exactly.
The thing that I love about this is nothing is easy, right? And so that's hard work, but that's the kind of hard work that when you, even if you're off the mark, you're showing Whoop that you're curious about what they're going through and suggesting things that you've done that might be applicable. If not, I'd love to customize my story and the work I could bring to you based on what your problem actually is, right?
Yep.
So I think that's really good. I've read a couple of people that have suggested that try to solve a problem for the company. One of the things I always say is, like, if you're a college student, just try to find a problem on campus. Anything that irritates you, I mean, that's how products get created, right? And anything that's irritating to you or that you hear people talking about that's not working, take on that challenge. And I think that's true inside your company.
Yep.
I think it's a little bit harder to discover at somebody else's company because people tend to put on a good face to the outside world. But it is an interesting possibility. So.
Well, that's, you think about like for a college student or someone just who graduated, restaurants, when we used to go to a mall, right? When you have a problem, I mean, you experience something, call the customer service line, experience the customer service, right? They're the ones who gets all the negative feedback. If you can understand what they're dealing with, if you can connect with a customer service representative and understand, like through LinkedIn or locally, you can understand a lot of the problems the company has. You can understand the growth stages by looking at Whoop and all the people they're hiring and whatnot and why they're going through that, and reach out. And it's just another avenue to approach the job market out there. So if you're talking to someone, right, we've, like you mentioned, right, we've got so many people on LinkedIn. I've been looking for a job for, a year and a half, 8 months, whatever it is, and they're just so frustrated. They're like, I'm doing all the things you guys are telling me to do. What do you say to them?
You know, it's funny. I was just reading James' next thing here. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to know what a problem is at a company that you're working on. I agree with that. Right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's the only possible way would be if you could actually talk to a couple people that maybe worked around the area, where you are at the company. I mean, one of the things I like the concept of an externship
Hmm.
where you actually would go to a company and say, oh, look, I'd be happy to work for a few weeks, give you a chance to see my work and work for free. And um, I see things now pretty regularly. Don't do stuff for free for a company,
Yeah.
right? Because they're just using you. They're asking everybody to come up with a marketing plan for this problem. Well, you have a choice. Either you say, no, I'm not going to work for free, and there's a very good chance that you're not going to go further in the interview process, or you can decide to spend an amount of time that you commit to do it. Right? You don't want to do 2 weeks worth of work for free, but if you could get an externship where you could go in and work with the department. And I can hear people right now saying, I can't even get anybody on the phone. How would I ever get an externship, right? And so this level of creativity is an offer, right? And so I've got two concepts going at once here. One is, should you do a project for free as part of an early interview to show your work? In this marketplace right now where it's high supply, low demand, I think yes.
Yes. Hmm.
And I think you should time box it to what you think is fair and realize that you're actually just making an investment in yourself and the way you actually develop that. So you could actually almost present that case study in another interview saying, I did this work and I thought you might be interested in just seeing how I approach a problem, just change the names. And so that's a great example of doing, let's say, 20 hours of work that actually can help you in your overall job search if it doesn't get you that job.
Yep.
The idea of an externship, now you actually get to interface with some of the people. That's a key in this process. So James seems to be very active here. They want you to work for free to show your passion, but do something for free, and they don't care about it because it's done in a vacuum for free. So yeah, I think that's what I've been talking about. The idea of applicant abuse, let's say, taking
Yeah.
advantage of free labor with no intention of hiring somebody,
That's
I,
wrong.
I think that's bad,
Yeah.
right? But if you can suss out, and I think what you can ask, for example, in that scenario is, if I do the work, will you give me a chance to present it?
Yep. Hmm.
And so that's a clue, right? If somebody says, no, we're just going to review the submissions, you say, okay, now that's going to make me time box probably to a shorter number of hours. I think what you know what I mean by that, right? It's like,
Yep. Yep.
okay,
Yep.
if somebody says, do this presentation, that could take 30 hours of work. You're
Hmm.
not going to work on it for 30 hours. What you're going to say is, I time box this for 5 hours. So now you can see the work I can do in 5 hours for this. I would love to do more, but in order to do more, I need more insight from you because
Yep.
it's a two-way conversation.
Hmm.
And I need to have a conversation where you can start to see what I'm like while I'm experiencing what you're like in this process.
Exactly. Yeah, it showcases your skill sets. And I think that's a lot of what is lost in the job search process these days if you don't go and do what you're saying to do, because what you're doing is everyone is submitting a resume, everyone's submitting a cover letter, an application, and it's all ends up being the same of what we've done. But now, how is what we've done relevant to what the company needs for today? How can you
Right,
showcase your problem solving skills and your abilities in marketing, in sales, and
right.
whatever it may be type thing?
So what
So,
I've tried to do with Boom Band, one is create an arena that has all the jobs. For right now, we're in New England. We have remote jobs across the country. We have jobs for the big foundation labs like Perplexity and OpenAI and Anthropic and but we're mostly focused on New England, right? But what we've tried to do is create an environment where you can go in and either do a prompt basically of what you're looking for, or if you build out your dossier, which is a resume basically with lots of new components and lots of room for the stories that you want to tell, is that then you can actually use your dossier and put yourself in the center of the arena, and it will find jobs that match your background. So the more stories you tell, the more case studies you create, the more projects you document from your jobs, the more powerful your dossier gets as a matching tool in the arena. So we're seeing some people are just sort of phoning it in and just doing the bare minimum. Other people are really investing in telling the stories of their life. And so I really encourage people to try a new way. The idea for me is to build a bridge. Keep doing whatever you're doing and just try this out for size and see if you like this experience. And the practice of telling these stories also will help you in your interviews, because writing these stories down and identifying the skills associated with them is key to that process in the interview as well.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I was actually just going to pull it up too, just to show, if it's going to let me here, kind of what Boom Band looks like for you, right? You said, like you said, here's, you create your dossier over, I can't even speak today, dossier over here, right? And then you've got your arena where you're to be
Right.
discovered, and you said you're right at the center. And then people start to express interest, and it just builds and strengthens that. It's a big circle, just strengthening it. Anything else you want to talk to that?
Well, I mean, I think if you actually can go into the dossier, you should be able to just register as a guest. So
yeah, I'm not going to go through creating it. Well, back. There we go.
Yeah.
But
So
you
now
go
you
into
can
it.
you can say I'm looking for a marketing manager job in Boston, and this is what I'm looking for. And then what it'll do is it'll take that prompt and it'll go into the arena and it'll look for jobs that match that. And so what you're doing is you're basically now it's looking for jobs. I don't know if you put
I have put
quite
it
enough.
below.
Quite enough. Well, now so it's actually searching right now, and so there you go. So now it's actually finding jobs, and then if you go in the center. And the jobs that are closest to you are ones that match closest to that prompt. You can give it a lot of prompts. We could give it more prompt, but then you can go and if you click on the house in the center, it'll open that role, and you can actually see that role and that description for a marketing manager. And if you scroll down on that, you'll see a full description, and you'll also see the skills that it's pulling at the bottom. So you didn't put any skills in, so it's not matching against any skills. And then so what you're doing here is you can start to what I call play the game. So you can start to refine that search, and you can start to get very specific about what you're looking for. And then what it's going to encourage you to do is if you express interest in one of these roles, it's going to suggest that you build out your dossier. And once you build out your dossier, what you're doing is dragging in your resume or dragging in your LinkedIn profile, maybe a bio. There's lots of other stuff that you can do with this. And if you just go back to the homepage, so it's going to ask you to register now.
Yeah.
And so if you just go back to the homepage, you can scroll down and you can see different examples.
Yeah,
And
like
so that's my dossier. So if you click on, there's some navigation down below there. This isn't the way it works on the site, but you can see my work experience. You can see my life work and passions. You can see information about me, and you can see the Power Lab. And the Power Lab is cool because now all of your stories, the skills that you've highlighted in all these stories are all here in your Power Lab without the story. But then if you roll over these skills, it will actually tell you the stories and it'll show you where you got that experience. And so for scouts, this is for recruiters, this is fun because you can put a job in the center and the people will come around. And in this case, for what we call a player, for you as a job seeker, this is something that's actually a very different way to look for a job. And by looking in the arena, now we're suggesting companies to you that then you can go and research, you can go look at their profiles, etc. I see Miguel in here. Interesting. Thanks for stopping in. Let's talk a little bit about AI, because I think AI is sort of like the big bad wolf here right now. And I think the reality is that you're going to see a couple of things happen. One is that OpenAI and Anthropic and others are going to go public. And as they do public offerings, they're going to raise billions of dollars. And so I think what you're going to see is a lot of the money is going to be in the valuations of those companies, and a lot of the cash that's going to be deployed into the market is going to literally be in 6 zip codes in California. And the whole world is going to watch this happen. And so I think what you're going to see is the next level of shaping, very similar. It's not perfect. I think sometimes I talk about the history has a tendency to sort of echo, or it rhymes, but it's not, it doesn't repeat itself. But if I remember the Yahoo, Google, Alta Vista, Lycos battle, and it was all a battle for who was going to control the pipes and who was going to control search. And then what happened is the next wave of activity were all applications on top of the internet, and Monster was one of those applications. I think this time around, AI is considerably more pervasive into the company's operating systems. But I think what you're going to see is that there's going to be a whole new set of companies that are coming out. So I think it's important to understand these tools, to interact with these tools. And I believe that it is going to change the face of many of our companies and many of our jobs. And so I don't think this is a time to sit by idly. I think this is the time to start really learning. And maybe I'm restating the obvious, but I think that there are a lot of people saying, oh, my job will be fine, but I feel bad for the copywriters or for the digital photographers or for the customer service reps. And I think as AI keeps eating more and more tasks, that it's going to evolve into all of our jobs. And so I think that's my message that I want to send on that. I also think that when I look at the marketplace, that we've had something like 12 or 13 recessions in history, and we always recover.
Yep.
I think we will recover from this one, and I think each of these causes changes in what we do, and I think that will continue with this disruption. And I think what we're going to see is that many of our jobs are going to change, but they're also going to evolve, and there's going to be new careers that are formed. And so I just think we're in this awkward time right now where we're really experiencing the beginning, the front end, or the tip of the spear of this change. And so a lot of confidence.
Think about the internet, right? What happened? We're like, oh, we were kind of nervous. What was going to be on there? How is this going to work? And it did change everything for better and worse, just like any other change does. But I think AI is going to be, like you said, the same way. But we have to know how to utilize it and still use our human aspect of it for, like we said earlier, the experience, the wisdom, those type of things, and figure out how we can use now our God-given brains to master this technology to make our companies better, our lives better in that aspect. I mean, I've used it to go through my emails and say, hey, you know what, I might have skipped some emails here over the years and missed out on responding to things or whatnot. And it pulls up a beautiful list of all the things and prioritizes it, and great. And you're like, oh my goodness, that would have taken me forever or cost me quite the pretty penny to have someone else go in there and do that too. So I think it's just how we use it for good.
So Share your job a little bit with the group, just so I can hear like what you
Yeah,
offer.
no. So I work at the intersection of candidates and companies, and I help candidates define their position out there in the market. I noticed a big pattern, especially after COVID, when everyone became a health coach and career coach and all these things. And I was doing this before that, and noticing that people were getting lost in the keywords, right? Just submit the application, just change
Sure.
this the keywords and things like that. And that every human being on this earth has been put here for a very specific reason and time, and has been given God-given talents and skills and abilities, and they are to use that in these companies. But a lot of these systems over the years, they've people have attracted to the systems and not said, this is who I am. They're trying to fit themselves in a job description box. So it's kind of like what you're doing right now, is saying, hey, you know what? Yes, you have the job description, you have what you're capable of doing, but this is your whole story. How are you going to present that to a company? And so getting people kind of out of their shells, out of, not necessarily out of the technology shell, but out of their shells, and saying, hey, this is, I'm confident in who I am, what I'm capable of solving for an organization. And then saying to the organizations, hey, let's not just put a job posting up because we had a, graphic designer and now they're not here anymore. Why do we really need a graphic designer? Why do we really need this person in this role? How are we growing? How are we expanding? Please, let's put metrics to some of these things that are on the job description,
Right.
right? Like, my favorite one that still is out there, and you've seen it too. How do you put a metric to the person must have good written and oral communication skills? I don't know. Why do we even put it on
Yeah.
there? Right? Type
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, at this point, I
I would
mean,
hope so.
it's funny. I have 12 and 15-year-olds, and they have the hardest time talking on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they just don't have much experience with that. Like everything
Yep.
is text, and
Mm-hmm.
I see these long texts going back and forth. And it's like, why don't you call this person? It's nah, yeah. Right? And I also know someone who's an eighth grade school teacher, and the conversation is about attention span, and I think this next generation is going to have challenges, and every generation does, but that's still to come.
Oh
I
yeah,
think the
we teach our boys all the time because we homeschool, and we have elderly neighbors, and we go, no, you know what? You're gonna go over there. You're gonna talk to Mr. Bob. You're gonna ask him the question. You're going to go help him. You're going to use your words, and I think we've lost a lot of that, even as our ages and whatnot out there, and we have to learn to get that back, because that's going to be such a value add moving forward. You can use AI and everything like that, but you have to know what to put in. You have to know how to talk to people and
yeah.
communicate why you're here and what you're supposed to do.
So, so a couple things just to wrap. One is you can go to boomband.com and just check out a new way to do this. I think what I'm suggesting is keep doing the way you're doing it, but why not try something different?
Mhm.
And the second thing is we have something called the Boom Band Showcase, where we feature 2 or 3 job seekers every week and just help them be human and kind of pull them out of the black hole and actually put them out there where people can hear their stories. And the idea of encouraging people to tell the stories of their lives, I think, is something that's been a dream of mine. And I hope we can continue to kind of encourage people to do things differently and not just try to trick the ATS system, but to really kind of bring their whole self, to the idea of looking for a job. And so I'm mostly trying to build confidence and to say that there is a numbers game, but it is the ability to actually synthesize what you're like and to be able to look at a plan that will go after the companies you really like to work for. All these things are harder to do than actually to speak of. And so I always have a lot of empathy for job seekers that are going through this process, but to keep your spirit up, and there is a job on the other side of this. So,
There absolutely is.
um,
Well, I want to
thank you
thank you
for,
first of all for like creating monster.com and all this, and then continuing throughout your career to help job seekers and companies connect. I think that is such, it is a value add, and I'm so happy that now this Boom Band is your vocation and just your passion, and I love it. And guys, do go to Boom Band. I actually started using it for a couple clients and us walking through it too, and it really does put a different perspective on how to go find jobs out there. And so, thank you again for joining us, Jeff. Is there anything else you want to leave people with before we sign off?
No, I think the whole idea is that you need somebody to help you in this process. Don't go by yourself. Reach out. Your network will be supportive. I think what I've said is that LinkedIn actually likes a challenge story, and so if you put your challenge story out there, people will respond to it. And don't get frustrated. Just keep building. You're going to get to that job. So,
Yes. Well, thank you guys, and we'll see you later.
bye.